Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 28 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the MP for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, Eric Duncan. Eric was first elected in the 2019 election and was re-elected in 2021. Before his election as MP, Eric was one of the youngest elected officials in Canadian history as a municipal councillor in North Dundas at the age of 18, and he was elected mayor in 2010 at the age of 22 with 72% of the vote. Eric also worked alongside his father at JED Express, the family business in South Mountain, for 3 years. Eric currently serves as the Conservative Caucus Party liaison. Thanks, Eric, for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me back on. It's good to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm glad we're able to set this up, and I guess if you're ready to go, we'll get started.
Go through the questions, you bet.
The first segment is called Eric's Story, where we'll talk a bit about your political history and background. So first off, when did you first get involved in politics? I know you were elected at a young age, but when did that all start? When did your interest start?
So it's actually kind of crazy. Somebody said to me last week, I just turned 35, and I've been in elected office for all but maybe a couple months of my entire adult life. So I'm 35, nearly half my life I've been in elected office, which is kind of interesting. And got broken gently, I tell people, but it just didn't start when I ran for office at the age of 18 in North Dundas. It started off as a volunteer for our local provincial PC association, and then eventually our federal conservative association in our riding. And there was a woman that was very instrumental, Judy Bobka. Judy was a wonderful mentor to a lot of young people that came from Cornwall and SDNG. If they came to an event, they showed any interest in politics, she grabbed right onto them. And I remember she called me every day. We spoke very often. Every time we had meetings and events, she made sure young people had great mentorship with her. So they were involved in the board, they were involved in fundraisers, they were involved in campaigns. And it's been neat to see. There's a whole alumni of the Judy Bobka network from the Cornwall area. I've gone on to become an MP and went through elected office, and Judy helped along the way. Sadly, she passed away in 2015, but there are many people I still know that she got involved and helped out, and some do website design, some are in the private sector now, but still interested in politics. So I got involved by volunteering with our local associations young when I was about 13 years old, and I was blessed to have a Judy Bobka in my life that helped, couldn't let me get away once I got involved.
So when you did get involved, you ran in municipal politics and you were in municipal politics for a while. But why did you decide to run in 2019 for MP? Like, what made you make the jump to federal government? Why 2019? Why all that? Why?
Good question. So a few things. My municipal experience, I love my time in municipal office. I'm a proud conservative, and I was a conservative, a small c conservative, when I served as a councillor and a mayor. But municipal politics is structured much different. There's not a party apparatus at the municipal level, at least in the province of Ontario. And so the other thing that with all that was that it was about relationship building, working with people, getting things done. And so I also worked for my predecessor on Parliament Hill. So Guy Lauzon was my predecessor. He served federally in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry between 2004 and 2019. And so I worked between the Hill and the constituency in Eastern Ontario for the better part of 9 years. So that gave me a good experience of things here. And I decided not to run for mayor in 2018 and took a couple months just to be low key, still working at our family business at that time. And then Guy decided to retire. So I had a decision to make about whether I would make the jump, make the plunge at that point. And I decided to, and I'm glad that I did. It's crazy. It's 3 years in. Some days it feels like it's 3 weeks. Some days it feels like it's 3 decades, but all mostly in a good way most of the time. So that's how I ended up. The door opened, and I took the opportunity. And I also say, too, that I think is important for young people. Going back to my previous answer, the same thing applies here. When I ran for office, I just didn't start 6 months before an election. I've been involved in the community. I've been volunteering, working, building networks in the community, building trust, getting a good, hopefully a good reputation, a reputation of sorts, by working with our Conservative Association, working in municipal politics, working as Guy's staff member. That was years of work. That wasn't me saying I'm running for something, but it helped build a base that in the event that the time came and I wanted to do it, It just isn't something that pops up and you have 2 months to do. It was indirectly years of networking and support and building up, credibility that allowed me to do what I've done.
Well, and that's so important in politics, just knowing people and being passionate and having those good conversations. It's just so important. Our next segment will continue on those points now. It's called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk about your experiences and achievements in your time as an elected official. So, first off, what is your favorite part about serving your community as an elected official?
There's several things. The first thing I think of is I think of the pinch me moments that I have being able to walk onto the floor of the House of Commons. Only about 4 feet in front of me is our leader, Pierre Poilievre, that leads off our question period and so forth. In being able to get up and speak in the House or ask a question in question period or do a statement to be at committee. Those are things just an absolute honor to be able to do that. And I tell people that the work that you see when we get to the floor of the House of Commons is the delivery of what we want to say and how we want to say it. But it's a lot of prep work that goes in behind to make sure we're well spoken and prepared to deliver an effective question, to deliver an effective speech, and so forth. So just that experience in itself is several times I've had to stop and just reflect on how fortunate I am to be one of the rare Canadians to serve in Canada's Parliament. But the other thing I think is too, and I say there's two angles of this. There's a local angle of being an advocate for constituents on case files, for an example. This is something that's often underestimated or not talked about enough in the work that we do. We have a constituency office, we have full-time staff, and I work closely with them as we help people navigate a lot of challenges using federal services. Sometimes it's easy, it's just a matter of applying for a passport, but when they need to leave in an emergency, when there's a problem, people need to file their taxes, they're not getting their child tax benefit, they have an issue with CRA as a business filing their GST. People are trying to sponsor a family member to come and arrive through immigration. We're those advocates that tries to problem solve, sadly, a bad customer service standard happening right now in our federal government. But we can be those local advocates to say, whether you're in government or opposition, you're still the member of parliament for that community. And you can be kind of that person that helps navigate and solve people's problems. And we literally help hundreds and hundreds of people in our constituency office every month do that. So that's one thing that I enjoy. And then the other thing is to be an advocate on issues, on the topic. So being able to be the pulse of our community of bringing the concerns, no new tax increases, people's frustration with the carbon tax, inflation, people very frustrated about wasteful government spending, getting to be the voice and being able to call that out in the platform we've been given is something that I love and consider blessed to be able to do.
And before I go on to the next segment, the next question, tell me a bit about Caucus Party Liaison. What's that like? What does that encompass, and what do you do in that role, and how do you balance that?
Great question. So the first thing, whenever I was appointed to Pierre's leadership team, I was fortunate to serve on the leadership team under Aaron O'Toole and now as Pierre, and returning to a role that I had briefly under Aaron in this. So the first thing people say is congratulations for being on the leadership team. And those are the daily meetings we have with the leader, our House leader, Andrew Scheer, our whip, Carrie Lynn Finley, some of our Quebec team, deputy leaders, and our senior staff, our question period coordinator, Chris Workington, and we go over what's happening in the House that day, issues of the day, and we have a chance to strategize what we're doing in the days and weeks ahead. So that in itself is an intensive, important process, being a member of that team, leadership team. In my role specifically, I do a lot of the liaising, as is in the title, between our Conservative Party of Canada headquarters, just a few blocks away, and our National Caucus, our elected members that represent a variety of ridings. So I work to go back and forth between not only just HQ, but making sure our membership is engaged and making sure there's a good relationship back and forth between, for example, our party conference and convention that comes up, and making sure we're staying up to date on what we need to do for election readiness, for an example, as well. And then one of the other things behind the scenes, I'm a big passionate advocate on professional and personal development for myself and selfishly, but my caucus colleagues and our staff. So I do a lot of things behind the scenes to help build up and train our team to be ready for and have some skills that can make them even better members of parliament, better senator, a better staff member in whatever role they're in. I'm a firm believer that higher water raises all ships. It's a very inside baseball thing, for lack of a better term, or a very internal thing, but it's something I'm very passionate about and believe that I can make a difference with.
Now, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned how you've been elected for 3 years now and how that does sometimes feel far. I remember the 2019 election, and I still can't believe it's only been 3 years. Like, that felt like a lot longer. But anyway, besides that, what has been your favorite achievement over those past 3 years that you've been serving as an MP?
There's been a few. I mean, I'm very proud that despite being I still rookie-ish, I've worked on the Hill, so I've been around for I'd say 15, the better part of 15 years as a staff member, and then now as member for the last three. But I'm very proud to have served in the leadership team under two leaders, under Aaron O'Toole and now under Pierre Poilievre, and so that's an honor. It's an intense job. It's a big commitment, but I'm just proud to be able to ask and offer my talents and skills to do that specifically on that. In terms of an issue, I mean, one of the things that I think is a good piece of advice that I was given in my time is that as members of parliament, you want to be a local advocate on local issues in my riding, which is absolutely important. And sometimes there are local issues like the waterfront lands that are owned by Transport Canada, trying to get those divested into local control and have more of a say and a better future for those lands and the opportunity that comes with them. Our port of entry in Cornwall, low water levels in the St. Lawrence River, those are very specific ones. But back to the bigger picture, tax increases, cost of living, inflation, people's frustration with government spending, those are issues that resonate not just across the country or in conservative ridings, they are specifically in conservative ridings like mine too. So being able, but I will say the advice I got was don't try to be everything to everybody. Don't be an expert on every single federal topic. Your head would need to be massive in terms of a brain to have all that information. But become an advocate on issues of personal importance to you or in your region. And the blood ban, the discriminatory blood ban was something that I was proud to undertake and advocate for change. And that is a discrimination that unnecessarily lasted under this Liberal government for men who have sex with men. They were denied the right to be treated like others by donating fairly based on, and technology. So I was able to use my personal lived experience from being banned and blocked from donating blood just simply for being gay. That's not right. And finally, after years of pressure, I and many other advocates and outside groups were able to do. We basically, I call it shame the government into making a change. Not the perfect one, not the end of it, but that's just an example of where I was able to take an issue and move on it, become very knowledgeable on that specifically and what we can do and try to affect some change. So that's one policy file that I'm quite proud of.
Let's go on to the last segment now, which is called Politics Are All Around Us, which I really like to always ask about the world of politics that surrounds us every day. So, first off, who is or who was another politician or politicians that inspired you as an MP?
I love that question because there's actually I'm a history buff, and I wouldn't say like long past history, political history, specifically in all I would say history and current events of everything in Canada, federal, provincial, municipal. I follow American politics right down from national, state, and local elections. And then in the United Kingdom, I do the same thing there. And I follow Israeli politics quite closely as well. And so I love going back and reading about leaders and times in history, the problems that they did. And again, there are some apples to apples comparisons of history repeating itself, but I think there still are lessons of leadership and management and public opinion and personality that I've been able to learn and evolve from. And so that question, the trio of conservative leaders that I found fascinating and very effective, different ways and different reasons over their tenure, were from the 1980s. Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, and our own Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses, undoubtedly, but from Thatcher's perspective of her leadership and strength and power, particularly as a woman during that time period, is incredible in itself. But just her Iron Lady mentality and her strength, I think, as a conservative, really inspired me to. She made a lot of tough decisions that were proven to be the right ones, difficult, personal, emotional for sure at those times, and something I value from that. Ronald Reagan, an incredible communicator, the great communicator as he was nicknamed. Loved his presidential library, which I visited going back a few years ago. But just his leadership from communication and his ability to have eyes and ears focused on him. And he did wonders for the Republican Party in his two presidential elections in 80 and 84. And then Brian Mulroney coming in 84. I think of the ability in today's Canadian political environment to get things done and be a good leader. I think during that time and tenure, the Acid Rain Treaty, free trade, a lot of those big things that he got done, it showed that good conservative leadership can actually achieve monumental, bold things. And so that reason, those three in that time period stuck out in my mind.
And finally, now I wanted to ask you, what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more going forward for yourself as a politician in federal government or in federal parliament, or just in general, just an issue that needs to be focused on from all lenses?
So I consider myself, as you can probably tell, I'm a huge nerd in many different ways, a political junkie and nerd, and following this. Here's what I think is absolutely essential we don't talk enough about, and it's waste in government or inefficiency. The technical word would be a technocrat. I consider myself a technocrat. And what does that mean? It is not only just looking at a policy to say, we need to balance the budget. We need to have passports delivered in a timely manner. We need to clear the immigration backlog. What I enjoy and what I love doing in my line of work is, okay, how do we specifically get this done? What are the micro details? What are the structures? What are the things that we need to do in politics to actually achieve fundamental change and actually implement what we say we're going to do? My biggest criticism of the Liberals is they talk a good game. I mock them a little bit respectfully, as respectful as it can be with word salad. They use every word possible, in my opinion, to make it flowery, make it like they're going to change the world and solve every problem that's out there. And in fact, they created a lot of them, but they don't have the ability to actually follow through and deliver on what they say they're going to do. So just an example, the Auditor General comes out and just rips the government constantly. This Liberal government, worse than ever before. Just everything they touch costs more staffing, more money, record amounts of money, and they're actually getting less results. We have tens of thousands of additional, for example, public servants in our federal public service, and the service levels have never been lower. So going back to that point is where I think we don't talk enough about, or that we need good leaders and good communicators in politics. But as conservatives, when we get to the other side of the aisle, when that time comes, we form government. What I want to be is a technocrat. We don't spend enough time about how do we actually technically, actually a lot of things, calling out a lot of things bad. More attention needs to be focused on that and the waste that goes along and the broken processes and the length of time it takes anything to get done anymore. That's where we need to actually, because you can say one thing and you can mean well, but very often we see a lot of people come into politics and governments like the current Liberal government operate that would struggle to manage a two-car parade. And that frustrates me. We need to, in my view, as a conservative, we need to spend more time calling out that waste and inefficiency and inability to keep their word and get things done in a reasonable time frame and in a reasonable amount of money.
That is all for today. Thank you, Eric, so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been a great discussion as always.
Well, it was great having you. And if you liked watching today's interview, make sure to go check out my other interview with Eric, which will be on Top 10 on Instagram. If you're watching this at the time of the premiere, it's going to be releasing on Friday. So to stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out my website, VincenzoCalla.com, and make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.